Next, I believe, Mr. Chairman, that just as this committee and the Science and Technology Committee were instrumental in the early years of assisting the scientists and engineers to take what was then known as ARPANET and DARPANET and develop the new switches and the new high-performance computers and assist them in their creation of what became the Internet, I believe that this Congress should develop an electronet, a smart grid, just as the widely distributed processing of information everywhere in this country and around the world led to the biggest new surge of productivity that we've ever seen in this nation. We ought to have a law that allows homeowners and small business people to put up photovoltaic generators and small windmills and any other new sources of widely distributed generation that they can come up with, and allow them to sell that electricity into the grid without any artificial caps, at a rate that is determined not by a monopsony. Of course, as you know, that's the flip side of a monopoly. You can have the tyranny of a single seller. You can also have the tyranny of a single buyer. And if the utility sets the price, then it'll never get off the ground. But if it's a tariff, if it's regulated according to what the market for electricity is, same way public utility commissions do it now, then you might never need another central station generating plant. In the same way that the Internet took off and stimulated the information revolution, we could see a revolution all across this country with small-scale generation of electricity everywhere. Let people sell it. Don't reserve it for the single big seller. Next, I believe that we should raise the CAFE standards. And I support your initiative, Congressman Markey, but I support your idea, Chairman Dingell, as well, that it ought to be part of a comprehensive package. And I've taken note of your statements and also some of the automobile industry statements that, long as it's part of a comprehensive package that includes the utilities and includes buildings and all the other sources, don't single out cars and trucks and pretend that that's all the problem. It's only a slice of the problem, and it's not even the biggest part of it, but it is a big part of it. Make it a part of a comprehensive solution, but let's not bring up the rear anymore on these auto standards. Basically, the problem is cars, coal, and buildings. So you've got to address all three of them in an intelligent way. Next, I believe that along with using the tax system and a cap-and-trade treaty approach, you should also not shy away from using the regulatory power. And I believe that this Congress should set a date in the future for the ban on incandescent light bulbs, give the industry enough time to make sure they've got all the socket sizes worked out and all the different features like dimmers and the rest that people want and the quality of life. They'll do it. You set the date. Tell them I'm not going to be able to sell that old, inefficient, wasteful kind at a set date in the future. They'll adjust. As long as everybody plays by the same rules, they'll adjust and they'll surprise you. Next, where buildings are concerned, I'd like to see you pass a law that I call Connie Mae, a carbon neutral mortgage association, and here's why. I used to be in a small way in the home building business before, when I came back from the Army and before I was elected to the Congress. And the selling price of a new house is something the market is very sensitive to. Some of you all know this a lot better than I do because you've been in the business in a bigger way. And so the selling price is what people look at, both the sellers and the buyers. But all of the things that we need to do to cut back down on carbon emissions are things that add to the selling price but don't pay for themselves until a couple or 3 years have passed. And so the appropriate thickness of insulation, the window treatments, the improvements that will sharply reduce the operating cost of that home or building, is routinely excluded from the initial purchase price because the market discriminates against it. We ought to set up a carbon-neutral mortgage association where all of those costs are set aside. They'll pay for themselves, but just like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, put them in an instrument that is separate from the purchase price. And when you go to closing on a house, you sign the mortgage, and they'll say, well, now here's your Connie Mae home improvement package here. You don't have to worry about paying for that because it'll pay for itself. The Congress of the United States has made sure of that. I recommend that strongly. Next, I think that you ought to require this committee, the Commerce Committee, oversees financial services. I think the SEC ought to require disclosure of carbon emissions in the corporate reporting. Just day before yesterday, the largest pension funds in this country, $4 trillion worth of assets managed by them, called upon the SEC and the Congress to require disclosure because it's a material risk. There are lots of companies where investors need to know if there's an exposure to carbon constraints, if they're going to be in real trouble because of some aspect of the climate crisis that they're not closing to their investors. Stockholders ought to know that, and those disclosures ought to be required. Now, I want to close, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, and thank all of you for the courtesy of allowing me to present these ideas to you. I'd like to close by referring back to the unprecedented nature of the challenge. As many of you know, the way the Chinese and the Japanese, both of whom use the so-called kanji characters, express the concept of crisis, they use two symbols together. And the first one means danger, and the second one means opportunity. This is the most dangerous crisis we've ever faced, but it is also the greatest opportunity we've ever been confronted with. And there are people who look around the world, Mr. Chairman, and look at the genocide in Darfur and the chronic civil wars in places like Congo fought by child soldiers, and they look at the tens of millions that die of easily preventable diseases and the destruction of the ocean fisheries and the rainforest and these other things, and they say, we just have all these problems. Isn't it terrible? Well, there were problems back in those days after World War II as well. But when your generation rose to meet them, the vision they acquired in facing down fascism served them well in giving them the ability to see that these other challenges were not political problems, they were moral imperatives. And that's what our opportunity is today. Not only to solve this and to say to the future generations, we did our part. This was our Thermopylae. We defended civilization's gate. We rose to the challenge. But to also say in the process, we dug deeply and we found a capacity we didn't know we had. It's there. We all know that. And that's what will give us the ability to successfully solve these other crises. That's the greatest opportunity of all that comes out of this climate crisis. It really is up to this Congress. And Mr. Chairman, and to all of you, I cannot possibly overstate the strength of the hope and good feeling that people all over this country have about this Congress and the new approach that they feel is being taken here. And I'm going to be out there, as I said, trying to stir up as much support for y'all doing the right thing as I possibly can. I wish you well as you undertake this